The town of Havenwood, nestled deep within the emerald valleys of Oakhaven County, had always been a place of quietude, its history woven with the gentle rhythm of seasons and the unspoken understanding of generations. But like any long-settled place, it harbored its share of hushed tales, whispers of misfortune, and the lingering echoes of unexplained events. Among these local legends, one stood apart, a chilling anomaly that defied logic and instilled a primal fear in the hearts of the townsfolk. The stretch of County Road 7, or as it was more ominously known, the Veiled Path. Unlike the well-maintained arteries that connected Havenwood to the outside world, the Veiled Path was a desolate ribbon of cracked asphalt that branched off the main highway just past the old Blackwood Creek Bridge. It wound its way through a dense, perpetually shadowed section of the Blackwood Forest, a place already steeped in folklore and whispered warnings.
The road itself was unremarkable in its initial appearance, just another forgotten piece of infrastructure slowly succumbing to the relentless embrace of nature.
Yet it was what the road did that set it apart, that shrouded it in an aura of dread. The stories began subtly, almost as afterthoughts in conversations over steaming mugs at Rosie's Diner, the town's unofficial hub. Old Man Hemlock, a recluse with eyes that seemed to hold the weight of Havenwood's history, was the first to articulate the unsettling phenomenon. He spoke of driving down the Veiled Path one crisp autumn afternoon, the leaves ablaze in fiery hues, only to arrive at the other end with a gaping hole in his memory. He couldn't recall the drive itself, the scenery, or even the purpose of his journey. It was as if a segment of his consciousness had been cleanly excised. At first, these incidents were dismissed as the vagaries of age or stress. People chuckled nervously, attributing it to absent-mindedness, or perhaps a bit too much of Rosie's potent coffee. But the whispers grew louder, more frequent, and undeniably more disturbing. Martha Coolidge, the usually meticulous librarian, found herself unable to recall the titles of books she had shelved just moments before, after a brief detour down the Veiled Path to avoid a fallen tree on the main road. Young Timmy O'Malley, a bright-eyed boy known for his sharp memory, couldn't recount his walk home from school after his mother, in a moment of distraction, had inadvertently taken the cursed route. The pattern was undeniable. Those who traveled the Veiled Path, even for a short distance, often returned with fragmented recollections, entire blocks of time missing from their minds. The extent of the memory loss varied. Some experienced fleeting gaps, like a skipped record. Others suffered more profound amnesia, struggling to recall recent conversations or even familiar faces. The one constant was the unsettling feeling of a void, a silent emptiness where memories should have been. Alara Vance, a newcomer to Havenwood, was initially skeptical of these tales. A freelance journalist with a penchant for debunking local myths, she had arrived in town seeking a quiet retreat to work on her next project. The stories of the Veiled Path struck her as quaint, perhaps a product of Havenwood's isolated existence and the tendency of small communities to embellish the unusual. But as she settled into her rented cottage on the outskirts of town, she couldn't help but notice the genuine fear in the eyes of the locals when the road was mentioned. They avoided it with a near-religious fervor, their routes carefully planned to circumvent its ominous presence. Driven by her journalistic curiosity, Alara began her own investigation. She started by interviewing those who claimed to have been affected. Old Man Hemlock, his memory further eroded by time, could only offer vague recollections of a coldness and a whispering sensation during his forgotten drive. Martha Coolidge spoke of a disorienting fog that seemed to cling to the road, even on clear days, and a feeling of her thoughts being subtly pulled away. Timmy O'Malley, though his memory of the walk had returned after a few days, vividly remembered a fleeting image of shadowy figures flickering at the edge of the woods. As Alara delved deeper, she discovered that the legends surrounding the Veiled Path stretched back generations. Old town records, dusty and forgotten in the archives of the Havenwood Historical Society, hinted at strange occurrences near the Blackwood Forest dating back to the town's founding. There were cryptic entries about unexplained disorientation, travelers losing their way and their minds, and hushed accounts of people returning from the woods with vacant stares and no recollection of their journey. One particularly chilling entry, dated 1887, spoke of a wagon driver named Silas Blackwood, likely an ancestor of the forest's namesake, who traversed the road and returned to town days later, completely catatonic, his mind seemingly wiped clean. The entry mentioned strange symbols found carved into the trees along the path, symbols that bore no resemblance to any known language or local markings. Intrigued and increasingly unnerved, Alara decided to experience the veiled path for herself. Despite the warnings of Mrs. Gable, her landlady, and the concerned pleas of Rosie, who insisted on packing her a thermos of memory-preserving herbal tea, Alara set out one crisp morning. She drove her sturdy SUV towards the Blackwood Creek Bridge, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. As she turned onto County Road 7, the change was immediate and palpable. The air grew noticeably colder, a damp chill that seeped into the car despite the closed windows. The sunlight that had dappled through the leaves on the main road seemed to vanish, replaced by a perpetual twilight beneath the dense canopy of ancient trees. An unsettling silence descended, broken only by the faint crunch of her tires on the cracked asphalt. Alara activated her voice recorder, determined to document every sensation, every detail. "Entering the veiled path," she spoke, her voice sounding oddly loud in the oppressive quiet. October 26th, 10:17 a.m. The weather is clear on the main road, overcast, and significantly colder here. A strange stillness in the air. As she drove further, a peculiar sensation began to creep over her. It wasn't a physical discomfort, but rather a subtle blurring of her thoughts, a fleeting sense of disorientation. It was like trying to grasp a dream just as you wake, the edges of your memory dissolving into mist. She focused intently on her surroundings, forcing herself to register every tree, every bend in the road, every patch of moss clinging to the asphalt. Then she noticed them, faint, almost imperceptible flickers at the periphery of her vision, shadowy shapes moving just beyond the tree line, too quick to be deer or any other known animal. They were tall and gaunt, their forms indistinct, like figures glimpsed through a heat haze. Alara gripped the steering wheel tighter, her heart beginning to pound. She told herself it was her imagination, the unsettling atmosphere playing tricks on her mind, but the feeling of something being taken persisted. It was a subtle tugging at the edges of her awareness, a sense of recent thoughts and observations slipping away like sand through her fingers. She tried to recall the license plate number of the truck that had passed her just before she turned onto this road, a detail she had consciously registered. Now it was gone, vanished without a trace. Panic began to bubble beneath her carefully constructed composure. She pressed down on the accelerator, wanting to get through this stretch of road as quickly as possible. The trees seemed to press in on her, their branches gnarled and skeletal, reaching like grasping claws. The shadows at the edge of her vision intensified, becoming more defined, though their forms remained disturbingly vague. Suddenly, a high-pitched, almost inaudible whine filled the air. It resonated deep within her skull, a sound that seemed to bypass her ears and vibrate directly within her mind. The blurring of her thoughts intensified, and a wave of nausea washed over her. She fought to maintain consciousness, her vision swimming. Then she saw it. Carved into the trunk of an ancient oak, directly beside the road, was one of the strange symbols described in the old town records. It was a series of interlocking spirals, etched deep into the bark, radiating an unsettling sense of wrongness. As her eyes focused on the symbol, a jolt of cold dread shot through her. It felt familiar, yet she couldn't place it. It was like a half-forgotten nightmare, lurking just beyond the reach of her conscious mind. The whining intensified, and the shadowy figures at the edge of the woods seemed to coalesce, their forms becoming slightly clearer. They were tall and slender, their limbs elongated and unnatural. Their faces were obscured by shadow, but Alara felt an intense, malevolent focus directed at her. It was as if they were feeding on something within her, drawing it out like invisible threads. Terror finally overwhelmed her. She slammed on the brakes, the SUV skidding to a halt on the cracked asphalt. She fumbled with the gear shift, desperate to turn around, to escape this cursed place. But as she looked in her rearview mirror, she saw one of the figures standing directly behind her vehicle, its shadowy form impossibly close. A wave of icy cold washed over her, and the last coherent thought that flickered through Alara's mind was the horrifying realization that the veiled path wasn't just stealing memories. It was taking something far more fundamental, something essential to her very being. When Alara's SUV was found the next morning by a concerned Mrs. Gable and a reluctant Deputy Brody, it was parked haphazardly in the middle of the veiled path, the engine still running. The driver's side door was ajar, and Alara was gone. A search party was organized, but days of combing the dense Blackwood forest yielded nothing. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, no trace of the missing journalist. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air. Deputy Brody, a man who had grown up on Havenwood's legends but had always maintained a healthy skepticism, found himself deeply unnerved by the scene. The interior of Alara's vehicle was undisturbed, her belongings still inside. But there was a chilling anomaly. On the passenger seat lay Alara's voice recorder. When Brody pressed play, the only sound it captured was static, a persistent, high-pitched whine that sent a shiver down his spine. The last entry, just before the static began, was Alara's voice, barely a whisper. "It's not just memories. It's taking." The recording abruptly cut off. Weeks turned into months, and Alara Vance became another chilling tale whispered in the hushed corners of Havenwood, a stark reminder of the veiled path's insidious power. People spoke of seeing fleeting shadows in the woods bordering the road, and the feeling of unease that permeated the area intensified. But the story didn't end there. Months after Alara's disappearance, a young couple, tourists passing through Oakhaven County, decided to ignore the locals' warnings and explore the scenic, veiled path. They were found a few hours later by a logging crew, wandering aimlessly near the edge of the Blackwood Forest, their eyes vacant, their minds blank slates. They couldn't recall their names, where they had come from, or even recognize each other. Their memories, their identities had been completely erased. This incident sent a fresh wave of terror through Havenwood. The veiled path was no longer just a local legend. It was a tangible threat. The county authorities, finally forced to acknowledge the disturbing pattern, erected barricades at both ends of the road, effectively sealing it off from public access. However, the chilling truth was far more complex and far more terrifying than simple memory loss. Years later, a group of paranormal investigators, drawn to Havenwood by the persistent rumors surrounding the veiled path, managed to bypass the barricades under the cover of darkness. Equipped with advanced recording equipment and thermal imaging cameras, they ventured onto the cursed road. Their findings were disturbing. They detected fluctuating energy fields along the path and captured faint, ethereal whispers on their audio recorders, whispers that seemed to echo with the fragmented thoughts and emotions of countless lost minds. Their thermal cameras picked up fleeting, indistinct figures moving within the dense foliage, figures that emitted no discernible heat signature. The most unsettling discovery was a cluster of the strange spiral symbols carved into a circle of ancient trees deep within the forest, adjacent to the road. As the investigators focused their equipment on the symbols, their recording devices malfunctioned, and they experienced a sudden, overwhelming wave of disorientation and nausea. They retreated in haste, shaken and convinced that they had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent. One of the investigators, a psychic medium named Serafina, claimed to have sensed a consciousness emanating from the road itself, a silent, hungry entity that fed on the very essence of human experience, on the intricate tapestry of memories that defined who they were. She believed that the veiled path was a conduit, a place where the veil between worlds was thin, allowing something from beyond to reach into their reality and consume the very fabric of their minds. The true horror of the veiled path, Serafina theorized, wasn't just the loss of memories, but the absorption of those memories into something else, something unknowable and terrifying. The victims weren't just forgetting. Their experiences, their identities, were being assimilated, becoming part of the entity that resided within or beyond the cursed road. And so, the veiled path remained sealed, a silent testament to a horror that defies explanation. The trees whisper secrets carried on the wind, secrets of stolen moments and vanished lives. The asphalt lies cracked and waiting, a hungry maw in the heart of Havenwood's shadowed woods. And the chilling question lingers: what truly happens to those who travel the veiled path? Are their memories simply lost? Or are they woven into the fabric of something far more sinister, forever trapped within the whispering asphalt? The answer, like the road itself, remains shrouded in a terrifying and unforgettable mystery.